Ship. This week I'm joined by Pablos Holman. Now, if you've never heard of Pablos, I became aware of him through an incredible video that he did through his time when he was working with Singularity University and really talking about the future of the world. This guy is a hardcore futurist that sits at the kind of, I'd say, intersection of being both an entrepreneur and a truly classic inventor. With over 70 patents to his name, this guy has been one of the key inventors in the early stages of Intellectual Ventures, which was founded by the original CTO of Microsoft, Nathan Myhrvold. He helped build a research lab for Jeff Bezos to research alternative forms of space travel, Blue Origin. He has founded multiple companies. Most recently, Boardroom One, which is a compliant, like board level communications platform. He's a general partner at Deep Future, and as I mentioned earlier, also a former faculty member at Singularity University, where other great guests from Ship have come from, including Rob Gonda and Salim Ismail. So I'm really thrilled to talk to Pablos today. And what we're going to get into is basically kind of when you think about innovation, is it kind of true invention that reshapes the world, or is it this kind of innovation that you might see from entrepreneurs where they harness innovative ideas to create what some of us may perceive as world-shaping ideas? So with that, here we go with another week of Ship. Pablos, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey man, I'm doing great.
Yeah, great to see you. Loving the all black background. I think it's very on brand, very sharp. So where are you calling in from today?
I'm in Seattle today.
Awesome. Nice little break from, I'm guessing, a lot of travel when I look at your
Yeah,
schedule.
I think I was in North Carolina and Mexico and Kentucky and New York and San Francisco in like the last week.
Wow, I love it.
Oh, and Houston. Also
Next
Houston.
time you make it through North Carolina, look me up. I just moved
Oh,
here.
okay.
Yeah, missing my first after moving from Miami, missing my first hurricane in many decades. So
Aw.
and I said, shout out to all the friends and colleagues that we've got down in South Florida, on the west coast of Florida today. Obviously, it's a pretty crazy time down there.
Yeah.
I tried to do you justice in a brief intro without talking for 10 minutes about all the kind of crazy, amazing stuff you've been able to do in your career. And obviously, I've done my fair share of research on you over the years, but I'd really like for our audience to learn a little bit more about you. Could you give a little bit more insight about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I have a, I don't know if it's weird, but I grew up in Alaska, which is
That's
pretty
awesome.
remote.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an island. And I got a computer when I was really young. I was like 9 years old. And that was in the 70s before anybody had ever seen a computer. And I had one of the first ones you could have at home, an Apple II.
Yeah.
And so nobody for like 1,000 miles in any direction knew more about it than me. So I had to learn everything the hard way, just crash it and reboot it. And so that ended up, I don't know if that sort of made me sort of autodidactic, but I also, learned to learn through reverse engineering. And so, I had to learn how to code by reverse engineering assembly language, which is the machine language for a computer. That's a masochistic thing to do. Nobody would do that. So anyway, I learned a lot about computers from a really young age, and then I got such an early start that I only had to learn the new stuff. And so I was always so interested. It was like a bottomless pit of puzzles for me. And so I just learned all the new stuff that people could do with computers and that they were capable of, and just kept up with it for so long that it got hard to catch up to me. And so that took me a lot of places. By the time I got out of high school in the late 80s, computers had sort of proven themselves as being sometimes useful. And so every business was trying to get computers. And so I would go, I got a lot of chances to go into different industries and put the first computers in and help people see how they could be useful. And I was really excited by being able to show people that this technology could help them and make their life better. And then, over time, it just sort of advanced beyond that. Computers got very powerful and useful. They could help with a lot of different kinds of problems. And so I started trying to invent things that we could do with computers and take them new places. And that just kept going. And now I kind of do that, but from a higher level, maybe with technology in general. Computers were a very useful superpower that we got. And now, now I'm trying to advance other technologies that can help humans, make things better. So
Sometimes when I talk to people that have had these kind of really interesting journeys through their career, they look back and there's like an inflection point. There was like a moment or a project that kind of changed everything for them. Was there one of those for you where you're like, it went from like, hey, I'm pretty smart on this stuff to like, oh wow, like big people are now paying attention to what I'm doing, because obviously you've had some access to some pretty incredible things. So was it gradual, or was there like that moment? You know what I mean?
Oh, I mean it's either a lot of those moments or it's gradual. I don't know, because there were a lot of different things along the way that, I mean, I definitely did not have like a master plan starting out from the beginning, but the critical moment was probably very early, when I felt like I had this superpower. I was really excited about computers at a time when, I literally had a computer, and I also had a skateboard when I was like, 12. And people were pretty conflicted about which was a bigger waste of time, right? Because it was just that era in the world. Computers seemed like a waste of time and money. And it was difficult to prove otherwise. Like the spreadsheet hadn't been invented yet, so there was no strong evidence that people needed a computer. But I was so lit up about it, and so I think it was that moment early on. It was frustrating and hard and unrewarding, because the computer actually kind of sucked. It was a 1 kiloflop computer, So meaning, it could do math
my
problems.
first one was
like,
an Amstrad, and you
oh
learned
yeah,
you
okay,
put the cassettes in there and press the play on them. So
right, you got it. Okay, there you go. So you could do math problems faster with a pencil than with the computer. So anyway, so the moment that I think was the biggest inflection point for me was that kind of revenge of the nerds moment, probably sometime in the mid 80s or whatever, where computers really proved themselves to be a force that was going to stay. And people started to, when I was 16, 17, 18, I could go into a company and bring a Mac or some computer and show somebody how to do their job that they'd been doing for 20 years, but like in minutes, and show that I could do their job. And so, you see that enough times, and people's reaction to it and those kinds of things, those were early days, but in some sense, I feel like I'm still doing that.
So, I know that computers are kind of at the core of your, I think it's okay to call it obsession with technology. But I get the impression you work with a lot of different tech. Could you talk a little bit about your process for invention?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when obviously it starts because the computer is a unique invention. It's like, or a unique technology in that it's generally applicable. There's almost nothing that a computer can't make better. And so that just took me a lot of places. And then advancing the computer technology, means that it can go more places and it can be used in more things. But the truth is, there's lots of other technologies that we need to advance, and the computers have been helpful in advancing those technologies, right? So when you look at things like, now CRISPR, which is a advancement in biology, or advancements in chemistry, or even in semiconductors, all that stuff, it's possible because we have these powerful computers that we can use to help us. And so you don't get those kinds of inventions very often, and I don't have any illusions that I'm gonna, or that anybody's really gonna invent something as useful as a computer. But that's become a toolkit that's just, unequivocally like super powerful. So then, when you're trying, so then I think what I eventually learned, and maybe didn't understand as well when I was younger, is that you really, the valuable thing to do is start with problems, right? So you want to understand problems and internalize them, because when you can take a problem on, then you can go find the technology or invent the technology that can help you solve that problem. But as an inventor, if I don't have a problem, then I'll still invent something. It'll just be totally useless. Yeah, that's kind of where it
Yeah,
starts.
there was the old saying, and putting my entrepreneur hat on, you never want to be a business that's what they call solution in search of a problem.
Yeah,
I think
I have done
starting
that a lot
point.
of times.
Yeah, I've had at least one of those under my belt. I feel you.
Yeah,
In one of the videos I think people will know you most for, you talked a little bit around this kind of three kind of tracks, if I remember correctly, and it was like you've got this one track that's out there looking at every new piece of technology that you could possibly wrap your head around at any given moment, right? And it's
yeah,
so, and sometimes when I think about my own process, it's a little bit like dot connecting. So you've got like all
yeah,
these different texts that you're trying to absorb as many as you can. You don't necessarily need to be an expert in all of them because someone else
yeah.
has kind of invented this first part. But a lot of scientists invent these amazing things, but they don't actually have an applicable use
Yeah,
necessarily
that's
in the
right, and
beginning.
that's okay. I
Yeah.
mean, I think we have this, we've sort of led ourselves astray by imagining that one person's going to do it all, and that's just
Yeah.
not true.
It's not,
So
yeah, it
yeah,
takes a
like in
village.
fact, even with Invention in our lab when I was at Intellectual Ventures, what we did is we turned it into a team sport. And
Yeah.
that's what made us so prolific. We
Yeah.
got 6,000 patents on our own inventions by
Amazing.
turning it into a team sport. And that just meant, you know, find somebody with a problem and then surround them with a nuclear physicist, a laser expert, a chemist. I'm a computer hacker.
Yeah.
Collectively, we know the cutting edge in every area in science and technology,
Yeah.
and it's at the borders where you get the
Yeah,
inventions.
these intersections, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was so interesting. So it's like you're piling in as many new techs as you can. You're looking at as many problems as you can. I think with
Yes.
some kind of focus, and then you're like, okay, where can I find
Match them up.
these crossover? One of the things that left this big impression on me, I think you meant it as a joke, but I think it was kind of half a joke. And you're like, hey, and on top of that, every great inventor needs a garage. And then you showed a picture of your garage at the time at Intellectual Ventures, which was
Oh,
just this basic warehouse. I think you said you guys basically bought every machine you could
yeah.
possibly buy. And you're like, well, just in case we need it,
Yeah. Well,
we
what
know you're still
happened?
doing.
So at the beginning of building that lab, Nathan Myhrvold had wanted to build a lab, but to do invention, and that's different than building a lab to do, chemistry. If
Yeah,
you're doing chemistry, then you can build a chem
yeah,
lab.
yeah,
But we didn't know what we were going to be inventing, so we needed
yeah,
every kind of lab in every
yeah.
kind of science. And so what we did, Nathan really started it. He stayed up after midnight on these industrial auctions online, just bidding on random scientific equipment. So every day
That's
we'd get
awesome.
truckloads of new tools. 9 centrifuges would show up, and we'd, have some intern, try and get 3 of them working and scrap the rest. So we ended up with thousands and thousands of tools that wouldn't even fit in the lab. So we have a warehouse that like looks like the warehouse at the end of
You're
Indiana
extra
Jones,
garage.
full of tools but that was cool for us because one, we could do it in a pretty cost effective way because scientific equipment depreciates dramatically. So you could buy this stuff for pennies on the dollar. But the other thing is, if you could fix it and store it. And then the other thing is, if any project, if I needed a tool, I could have it that afternoon because we could just send somebody to the warehouse. So it was a very, very, I was fortunate to be able to operate. I mean, the difference really is just that we were operating at a larger scale than most inventors get to do.
I was
But
gonna say,
that's
as an inventor, it sounds like a bit of a dream job and
yeah,
environment,
yeah. It was a very special time and place, and I was lucky to be there.
So I have to ask, what's harder, being an entrepreneur or being an inventor?
Oh, I think the entrepreneurial part for me is harder because you have to deal with a lot of people. And
Yeah.
people are a big pain in the ass.
Yes, they
And they
are.
all have their emotions and opinions and all this kind of stuff you got to deal with, and you can't just like reboot them. So I don't cherish that so much. Some people are really good at it and love it, and
Yeah.
they're really and all that. But the emotional pain of entrepreneurship is very
Harder.
hard.
Yeah.
You're
Even harder.
responsible for a lot of people, and they're counting on you. They're so I don't know. There's a lot of things we could talk about there, but yeah, when you're an inventor, it is hard sometimes, especially if you're trying to do something new, you're trying to solve something for the first time, and you don't know if it's going to work.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean that can be the problem with being an inventor is most of them are doomed, right?
Mhm.
Because they will not
Hard. It's really
succeed.
hard here.
Yeah, they will not succeed technically. Even if they succeed technically, they will fail to
Yeah.
commercialize or set it on a commercial track that pays off in a lifetime.
Mhm.
They don't get enough shots on goal, so they end up spending too much time on one thing that doesn't pay off, and so it's a very lonely, sad,
Mhm.
and failure prone thing to do. That's why you don't know anybody with a business card that says inventor on it,
Inventor.
except for maybe me. And for me, I got to cheat because I got
Yeah.
to work at a larger scale where we got more shots on goal. I
Yeah.
got to work on a team, and so being an inventor for me wasn't as risky in some sense
Mhm.
as it was for a lot of people who you think of, that
Yeah.
crazy hair in a DeLorean type
Yeah.
inventor. Yeah.
I have a very, very close friend who's also been on the Reshapes show in the past,
Yeah.
who a biotech guy, and when he dropped out of Harvard or whatever it was, started building a biotech device in his garage.
Yeah.
And 2 years in, we're like, okay, it's a little longer than we expected. 4 years in, people were like, hey, Freddie, John really
Yeah.
respects you. Will you have a chat with them and say
Yeah.
maybe it's
Uh-huh.
time to move on? 6 years in, even I was like, oh man, this is
Uh-huh.
getting messy. 7 years in, he basically came out with a device that could do full spectrum DNA analysis in under 10 minutes for $5 or something.
Wow.
And Bill Gates, personally invested in his company, and
Well,
and
good.
so, but I
Yeah.
think it takes a borderline madman, and John is a bit of a madman to
Yeah.
get to that place, and it is lonely and really hard. And I think people listening to this conversation, whether now or later on any of our different streams, I think could say I think a lot of that has to do with the personality. And I think what's so interesting about one of the things you pointed out with intellectual ventures was that kind of this takes a village collective mentality, which obviously I'm very passionate about. And I think
Okay.
this really speaks to why having great partners is a good thing. Sometimes people don't
Yeah,
like
for sure.
the dealing with all the human side of it, and I think great collaborations are essential. I'm not a big believer in the genius and a million helpers model. Like, I think having
Yeah.
really great partners is where it's at. Obviously, there's some huge examples out there of a genius and a million helpers becoming very, very successful. But I think most
Hmm.
people should really go out there and find great
For
partners,
sure. Yeah.
and find that balance.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's one of the things for entrepreneurs. I mean, two things there. The invention side, I mean, people really don't understand how hard and long and slow it is to do something new.
Mm-hmm.
right? When you're doing something new that's never been done before, that first time is really, really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
The second time is fucking easy. And every time after that, by comparison, it's
Yeah,
easy.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I really I don't have a lot of respect for this idea that you know that inventors just got in the right place at the right time, and got lucky or something.
Yeah.
It's you have to
I,
dedicate
I
yourself
would
to
say
doing
that
something hard.
I think the process, I totally agree
Yeah,
with you on that. I think at least when I think of that side of it, I think being in the right place at the right time, there's a second part of invention you kind of alluded to earlier, or that a lot of people don't think about. Sometimes people come with brilliant ideas and they just can't get anyone to pay attention to them,
yeah, for sure.
because they're not maybe they're extroverted or they're a
Yeah,
genius in the backwater part of some state or some country, and they
yeah.
just don't. No one ever sees their stuff, which is kind of sad. And I think in those cases, there was maybe some luck with them, but certainly wasn't for their intellectual process. It may have just been the exposure part of it.
I
You
mean
know what I mean?
it takes a lot of ingredients to make something
Yeah,
successful, even once
yeah,
the
yeah. Here,
invention
here.
works.
A little bit later, I really want to get into some of the technologies that you're excited about, but I want to dig a little bit more into this kind of sitting at the intersection of entrepreneurialism and invention, effectively. And so, now I think the concept of deep tech is becoming more pervasive. But for those of you listening or watching or ship, if you're not familiar with deep tech, this is a kind of underlying technologies like telecommunications, AI, things that basically software as a language, like, or code. Those are like underlying technologies that power other tech. And then you could argue that there's kind of more shallow tech. We talk about companies like Facebook or Instagram or Uber or whatever. We talk about them as technology companies, and you could argue that Uber, with some of its self-driving car stuff, that's deep tech. But for the mobile app is not deep tech. That's
Yeah, I
effectively
call it
leveraging
shallow
other
tech.
technologies. Shallow tech, exactly, is shallow tech. And so so I want to just kind of get your sense around, like,
Yeah,
I feel like there's like an innovation cycle, right? So you see there,
sure.
even I think what you do is innovating on innovation. So you get these guys really, really early on who are like hardcore
Yeah,
research scientists.
yeah.
I don't even know if they consider themselves
Sometimes.
inventors. They're almost like scientists, right? So
Yeah,
they're
so a
having
lot of
these
times.
breakthroughs. And then I think there's the deep tech people that are, and I think you fall in a lot of this world where you're taking these things and then assembling them to something that's more useful. And then there's almost like these other people, yeah, they're inventing stuff, but it's this, they're almost taking these other innovations and they're applying them in a in more like a consumer friendly way, or applying them to the
Yeah.
business world.
Well,
Is that fair?
yeah, I mean, I think you know, the way I think about it, the easy way to delineate maybe and there's lots of overlap, is you got your scientific researchers. Their job is to figure out how the world works, right?
Hmm.
That's what science is about. The scientific research, your scientists are trying to figure out how does gravity work and what are magnets made of, like that kind of stuff. What's in a cell after all? That's scientific research, and their job is to figure out how does the world work. After that, at the other end of the spectrum, the thing we see the most is the entrepreneurship, right? That means, can you find a market, make a product, make a customer happy, get somebody to pay you for something, all of that business stuff. In the middle is the inventor. And the inventor's job is to take the output of scientific research and see if you can use it to solve a problem, right? Does this new discovery change anything humans have ever done, right? Can you do something faster, cheaper, or better, or in a more humane fashion? Like, you're trying to solve problems. That's what an inventor is doing, right? And they might start with a problem. They might have one problem they're so fixated on, they're going to try everything to get to it. That happens sometimes. On the other side, I'm like, collect all the, I read all the new scientific discoveries that I can, especially around computers. And every one of them is a chance to ask myself, can I solve any of these problems that I know about? And then I collect problems with the other side of my brain and match them up using the Rubik's cube on the inside. And that's really how I think of invention. But you need all of those stages. They're like developmental stages. And so the entrepreneurs are the ones that we've been really fixated on in the last couple decades. We support them, we cherish them, we celebrate them, we make movies about them, we fund them. That's entrepreneurs. And the problem with it is we've sort of overdone it, right? So now we have a whole generation. This wasn't true when I was a kid. Now your parents want you to be an entrepreneur, right? Now you kids grow up wanting to be an entrepreneur. Well, why is that? That's because we had a generation of entrepreneurs that became very successful, and so now it got legitimized. But when you look at it, what's happening is a lot of them, they're making great businesses out of, what's essentially just software, right? So we think we live in a world full of technology, but we really just live in this world full of software. And that's okay. Software is useful, and we do want to apply it to everything, but we shouldn't kid ourselves. That's not where the wins are going to come from going forward, right? Like if you drive down Highway 101 in the Bay Area now, right? Look at the billboards. Every single one of them is somebody advertising software product for software developers. Like it's getting out of control, right? So we've already done all the easy stuff. We've done all the things with software that, you can do. You can make a machine learning for scooter deployment, iPhone app or whatever. So that stuff's getting done. But I think that's kind of the easy stuff. And I think we should think of it as, a software industry and get back to the actual technology development, because we've been ignoring that. And so there's all this amazing stuff that came through scientific research that works, that was discovered, that was proven, that we did trials on or whatever, but then it got dropped on the floor because the tech industry doesn't want to do any hardware. They don't want to do anything hard.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, like that spectrum I was describing earlier. I feel like we're getting all these people who want to operate, want to play at that last, I'm going to call it like micro innovation stage of it,
right?
And not enough people that want to play at the macro innovation level, where these big, serious world changing ideas. And I want to also be clear, I don't want to diminish we
need both.
Changing global behaviors for consumers. Sure, that's something that's impressive. But I think a lot of times the micro innovations can be fleeting, even if they reach a billion people. You know what I mean? Versus the underlying deep tech that hopefully we use for decades in some cases.
Well, a lot of times deep tech. I mean, I think of it as, kind of the hard stuff and fundamental technologies. It's less about sprinkling software on everything, but. I mean, you still use software, but what people don't realize is that, the efficiencies of software, are just so vast that we got drunk on software, basically. Venture capital got drunk on software. Entrepreneurs got drunk on software, and so, they got to the point where they can do this very predictable, quick, profitable companies. I call them sassholes sometimes because I'm trying to antagonize them. But and that's okay. We need to do that. But I don't think we should kid ourselves and think that we're saving the world here. What we're doing is opportunistic in those cases. We're making a product that has some high value pain point for some company or person. That's fine. But there's a lot of problems in the world that are big that we can solve using technology and not that's not exclusively software. So I try to antagonize people to think about that a bit.
I think a little bit of antagonization is good, healthy nudging the world needs. So let's use this as a segue. there's so many things that I've seen you kind of touch on for people that follow you on social media and things like that. There's a lot of tech you're fascinated by, but is there anything that you think is worth chatting about now that we can talk about with the audience? Just have a little good old fashioned geek out session.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I get to see a lot. I go to labs all the time. I see, science fiction being incarnated,
Yeah,
in real time. So there's a lot, and that's the thing I think is so exciting, and why for me, I'm just wildly optimistic because, you can't. It's hard. It's hard even to find a problem that we don't have technology to solve, right?
yeah,
There's a lot of work to do and this is why I think, entrepreneurs are really missing out if they're building a company without a new technology, because we have so many and there's a lot of potential, and we could go, solve these things, but we have to build those products, build those companies. And
yeah.
so yeah, I mean, these days I collect those things. One of the companies I'm helping that I think is super cool is building, that people don't know about, is building solar panels, but they put them in space. And if you put solar panels in space, it solves the two biggest problems
Super
with solar:
efficient.
no clouds, no nighttime. So these solar panels can get 8 times as much sun,
Wow.
and they beam it down. They can beam that energy down to Earth anywhere on the planet using radio waves.
Is that how efficient is that? How much is lost? I don't know if you know, but how much energy is lost in that process out of interest?
Well, it's a good question, but it almost doesn't really matter because you get so
There's
much
so much
energy
more up the
to
top.
start
Yeah,
with.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But
I got it.
actually, the losses aren't as bad as people imagine. It's not so bad. So the losses are totally reasonable. It's
Yeah, yeah.
actually, this whole idea is not even very technically controversial. It's been around for a while. We know it'll work. Its only problem is launch cost,
Yeah.
and
And
launch
and
cost
that's
is
and
coming
that's going
down.
down all the time. I mean, those are the
Exactly.
this is a big thing. And preaching to the choir with you, but for those people listening, I'm very passionate about innovation, as all of you guys know. Nowhere near in Publicis league, but something that I've been watching for a long time. And I think sometimes I talk about tech, and people like say, "Well, that I don't get it. I just don't see it." But what they're thinking about is, the one thing that's been really consistent for a long time now. Technology is getting more powerful and always improves, and the cost simultaneously goes down. So while things don't
Yeah.
look realistic now, or we're
Yeah.
like, it's just not quite there, but it's going to get there. It always seems to get there. So
Well,
it's never a matter of if for most things, as long as it solves a real problem. It's more of a matter of when. And I think solar being a great, this kind of solar tech being a great example of that.
yeah. I mean, I think it's there's some nuance there. I mean, not
Yeah,
everything follows Moore's law.
yeah, true, fair
So
enough.
if and we've experienced a lot of those stories that kind of substantiate what we're talking about, were things that fundamentally just followed Moore's law.
Hmm.
And so, and if you look at Moore's law as kind of an abstraction, um, in a lot of ways, that is why we have these things like GPT-3 and Dolly and these things now.
Yeah. And
And
I tend
there
to
are other
focus more on
advancements.
computer focused tech, so that
Yeah,
maybe it makes sense why I feel that way.
yeah,
Versus a lot of
and
these
it,
bigger other technologies that I'm
but
sure
it's
you follow.
it's valuable because if you can take something and pin it to Moore's law,
Mhm.
then you can get those gains, right?
Mhm.
And so for a lot of people, they probably didn't think art was on the Moore's law track. Well, guess what? Now, as of this week, pretty well pinned to Moore's law. So sometimes you can solve a problem by figuring out how to pin it to Moore's law, and then you can
Mhm.
plot a curve and know when it's going to be solvable.
Mhm.
And so I don't think that's necessarily bad, but there are times, like for me, there were times when I got it wrong, and
Mhm.
I thought we were going to ride Moore's law, and we didn't. So, like a good example of that is probably our most famous invention is this machine that can find mosquitoes and shoot them down with lasers
Yeah.
as a malaria intervention,
Amazing. Yeah.
and people love that.
Yeah.
But we invented that, more than a decade ago, and
I
it's
remember reading
still
all about it when it came out, and that's a big
okay,
deal.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's super cool, and obviously we want that. But the laser didn't follow Moore's law,
Yeah.
right? Everything else we thought, oh, yeah, it's expensive for us to build this now, but
Yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
it'll just get cheaper. And we watched, and everything did get cheaper except for the laser, which
Yeah.
which is a not something that's solid state, and it
Yeah.
didn't get cheaper, and so it's still
Yeah.
too expensive to use in Africa.
Damn those lasers.
Yeah, well, so instead of building another scooter company, if you have entrepreneurs listening, go build a laser
Please go
company.
straighten the laser thing out. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's,
you'll enable a lot of that would be a deep tech thing. I would back that.
another one we chatted about, pre-show, and I think is very timely, given what's happening right now with Ian. Was you said you've been working on some technology related to hurricanes? Can we chat a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So, well, this is 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there. We invented this machine. Yeah, here you go. That can suppress a hurricane. So hurricanes are fueled by heat irradiating off the surface of the ocean. So the sun shines on the ocean, heats up the surface, that re-irradiates in the infrared spectrum, and that fuels your hurricane. So this is a giant tube. You stick it in the ocean, waves push the hot water on top into the center of this tube, because it's kind of an artificial beach, a ramp
Yeah.
around the top. So
Yeah.
the waves push the hot water in the top. That creates this hydraulic head that pushes the hot water down where it mixes up with the cold water below. Everywhere you have this problem of hurricanes, you've got hot water on top, cold water below, and you have a free source of energy, which is waves. So in this invention, which is literally the simplest invention we've ever come up with,
Yeah.
one of these tubes will pump a gigawatt or more of thermal energy transfer. So it
Wow.
brings the surface temperature down by 1 or 2 degrees for about a square kilometer. And you might need one of these every square kilometer all over the Gulf or something. But collectively, they'll get your Cat 5s down to Cat 4 or Cat 3. And,
Wow.
and they're made of like recycled truck tires and,
Yeah.
you can close this. I don't know what this is.
So
Um,
so
but yeah,
the
they're cheap to make, cheaper than the cost of a hurricane by a lot.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
these are the kind of things I feel like, again, as we start thinking about how we invest in technology,
yeah,
where this may look crazy, but I think with the increased frequency of these storms, the
yeah,
serious cost implications,
yeah.
this is preventative medicine effectively.
I
You
worked
know,
on that. Yeah, I worked on that. Whatever, 12, 13, 14 years ago, and nobody has come up with a good reason not to do it.
mm,
The problem and the reason it doesn't get done is there's no business model,
mm.
right? So we're
This
never gonna make a
the
dime
government
off
needs
that
to spend
invention.
in, basically.
Yeah, it's got to be done by governments, and unfortunately, modern governments don't seem very good at large-scale infrastructure projects.
It's a shame. You
So,
figured they would have figured that out by now. So, it's only been a couple hundred years here, but
we used to be good at it. We built
yeah,
railroads,
yeah,
we
it's a
built the
shame.
shipping industry, we built aircraft carriers, but we can't build a tube in the water.
Recycle tires to
Yeah,
prevent
I don't
hurricanes.
know.
Well, eventually, the U.S. being capitalist at its core, I think will eventually work out that this is just a good investment, in my opinion. I really hope that investment
Well,
and that
you'd think
investment pays
that,
off.
but we have, one of the problems is that we've abstracted risk. So
Mm,
hurricane damage, we don't pay for that. Insurance pays for that. The insurance companies have what's called a free rider problem, which means, if one insurance company pays for it, the other ones get the benefit for free. So now their operating cost is lower, and the guys who paid for it are no longer competitive. Even if you have a coalition of insurance companies pay for it, then the one that doesn't, they're the most profitable insurance company. So you end up in this situation where it's like a catch-22 of incentives. So government's going to have to step in and either do it or make all the insurance companies pay for it collectively. And so far, I haven't seen that happen.
Oh,
But yeah, it's a cool
well,
invention.
it's really cool, man. I love it. I want to talk about one more topical one. Obviously, AI generated art and imagery has been a huge conversation. Certainly, at least in my circles over the last couple of months. Most of these programs have been in beta in some format, although people are increasingly getting access to them. One of the most famous of those, I think, has been Dali. And just to be clear, for those of you who don't know it, it's Dalle versus Dali, like DLI, the artist, and obviously inspired by. And if you don't understand what this tech is, effectively, it is a computer that has been trained by being fed insane amounts of images and to be able to recreate imagery on the fly. And you could do something as simple as last night I was playing with it and said, a heavy set man looking into the camera and smiling, photorealistic, and it literally generates photorealistic images. They're not, they're a little flawed, but they look like photos. And or you could say, I could say the same thing and do be like in the style of Monet or something, and it would
Yeah.
make it look like impressionist art. It is, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's absolutely mind bending. You know, Pablos and I were in the space. I showed it to my 84-year-old mother though, and it damn near melted her brain. And my wife, who is and has been at least historically an artist, you know, so I effectively was able to recreate some paintings in the style that she does
Yeah.
in seconds, and it also kind of melted her brain down. Beyond everyone's brains melting over here at the Laker residence, I'd love to get your take, Pablos, from a technology standpoint. Where is this all going? Where does
Well,
it go from here?
yeah. I mean, look, you and I have lived through that cycle a lot of times. I mean, a calculator has been faster at math than you and I since we were born.
Yeah,
So, we've lived in a world where a computer could outperform a human at some tasks, and that has continued to grow over time. The kinds of tasks the computer can do. We had this big inflection point with machine learning, really a decade or so ago, but partly because the computationally we just got to a point where we had a surplus of computational ability for the first time, and so that's one thing. And then the other was kind of a breakthrough with deep learning, which made it much more practical to create AIs that could sort of figure stuff out. And the difference, just so it's clear for your audience, and if people aren't up to speed on this stuff, up until that point, we were in a world where computers could kind of do very prescribed things. You could feed them a recipe, and they could follow the steps of the recipe in a logical progression and get predictable results. And so computers were something that humans could sort of understand rationally if they were trying. What happened with AI is we got to a point where now the computer could ingest massive amounts of data, more data than any human ever could. And it could create its own algorithms. So what that means is, we use fancy terms like, neural networks and, computational modeling and Monte Carlo simulations and stuff. But the point is, it's actually pretty simple, right? Because what's going on in a neural net really is a computer is just randomizing a bunch of algorithms, testing them to see how well they work, and then throwing out the ones that don't work. And you just keep iterating on that. I'm simplifying a bunch, but you could think of it that way. And when we say algorithm, all we really mean is a formula like you'd see in a cell in a spreadsheet like Excel, right? So a formula, which is like, A16 plus A17 equals, that's a formula. Well, a formula generated by a neural net is like 7 miles long.
yeah,
It's just a super complicated algorithm that no human could ever understand or execute on their own. So what's happening, the net effect of that is that now the computers are able to find an algorithm that gives the best answers, and it's based on all this data, massive troves of data. And what happens at the end of that is you have a system where the computer can now give you a better answer, right? It can tell you a better answer, but it doesn't tell you why. In a spreadsheet, you can kind of go look at all the, I could go look at A16 and A17, and I can look at the bottom line and sort of understand what happened. I can read that formula. And you can get your head around it. So your relationship between causation and correlation has flipped, right? And that's uncomfortable to humans. So even for people who understand the technology, it's uncomfortable relationship with decision making. But the people who internalize these tools and understand AI and machine learning as a tool for humans to use, that next generation is going to be super powerful because we're giving them the best toolkit humans have ever had for making decisions. And so they're going to grow up with these tools and they're going to make better decisions. And the side effect, the parlor trick is DALL-E, right? So yeah, maybe DALL-E can execute on an artistic concept better than me, but you know what? I always sucked at painting. I was never any good at it. I might have had an idea in my head of an image, but I didn't have the skill to execute that. Well, you know what? DALL-E's letting me do that.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're not replacing artists, you're replacing craftspeople.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think that's a really nice way of thinking about it, actually.
Yeah, it's very important to understand the difference. We talk about art as if anybody who can paint is an artist. No.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who can, go to Carnegie Hall and get a piano, and they're a piano playing robot, and it's amazing that they learned to play a piano that fast, but they're not fucking Brahms, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't. So there's a difference, and I think we're very, very disingenuous a lot of times about understanding that difference. And so now DALL-E makes me an artist.
Yeah.
It's a tool, so I can get these visual ideas from my head into your head. That's what an artist is trying to do, but a lot of them had to hone a craft before to do it. Now the tool's there. So all these technologies, including DALL-E and GPT-3, these are just tools for humans to create. And we need to internalize that.
Let's take a hypothetical really quickly.
I'm preaching, I know. But
Yeah, no. I like preach on, brother. I think you're in the business of taking different technological ideas and bringing them together to create new ideas. I think at your core, I hope that.
I'm trying to add tools to the arsenal here.
Yeah. So, if you were to look 10 years in the future, let's assume we've cracked quantum computing by then.
No, let's not skip that one.
You don't think so? No. You don't think so?
No.
So let me rephrase it a different way.
Okay.
What if you applied 1,000 times the computational horsepower to something like DALL-E or whatever the future of DALL-E is?
Yeah.
Could that be? Actually, I'm not going to load the question. What do you think that starts allowing us to do?
Well, I think the near future is obvious because we now have DALL-E, we have deepfakes. We're going to be able, you can make those artistic images. The next thing you'll be able to do is make movies, and all your actors can be rendered. All of your, all the things that DALL-E can do for one still image, you'll be able to do for a film. And I think that'll be a powerful storytelling machine. Like right now, if I got a story I want to tell and I want to make a movie, I got to get millions of dollars and hire 500 people to execute on that. But you're going to be able to make a feature film with just in the same way you can make a podcast. Like I don't need a whole radio studio anymore to make a podcast. You can do it with your iPhone. And so you'll be able to make feature films with your iPhone. So that's where that's going. And I think, it's seen as obsoleting 500 people who used to be necessary to make a movie, but it's going to make 500 people into filmmakers that used to only be able to do one part of the job. So we just need to understand this is awesome advancements for civilization. This is, you think about musicians, you used to have to spend your entire childhood in frustration figuring out how to make a violin not sound horrible in order to become a musician,
Yeah.
and then start to maybe create something, or imagine getting an orchestra together just to be able
Yeah.
to record something. Well, they're all obsoleted by DJs who
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
at home with a MacBook. So,
Yeah.
and you can argue about it, but what are people, go look on Spotify, what are people listening to? It's not an orchestra,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not because we couldn't have an orchestra if we wanted. It's because they got outcompeted by a DJ who can make cooler
Yeah.
sounding stuff.
Yeah.
So I know that sounds a little brash, but the same thing is happening with with visual art now, and that's been a long progression that's been going on since Photoshop. But I think these things are these are good things that need to be embraced. You might suck at embracing it, and you're just going to grow old and die, maybe a few days before we figure out life extension. But your kids are going to grow up with 3D printers and Dolly and these tools, and that's going to seem normal to them, and they're going to be able to wield those tools to make the future they want, and that's going to be awesome for them.
I think there's a big opportunity in when I daydream about like where this could really go. I could see this being the thing that finally makes VR really awesome. I love this idea that you could say, look, I want to be in this immersive world that is this, and and it's effectively generating a game environment for you.
Yeah,
You
sure.
take that then
Easy.
with conversational chat bots, and it's like, yeah, I want to go to Bali.
Yeah.
And I have this vision of myself staring on a cliffside over this and this, and you're there and you're talking to other people, the NPCs. I think this, this is where I think that tech could go.
We're already talking to a lot of NPCs.
Yeah, right.
As far as I can tell,
in
non-virtual reality.
So I'm a hardcore science fiction nerd.
Okay.
I can tell that you clearly, you talk a lot about making science fiction real. So I have to ask, as my final question for you today, what's your favorite science fiction book of all time?
Oh man, I'm actually not. I don't read a lot of science fiction, so I have to say, other people, are much more authoritative on this. I've spent my life trying to implement Neil Stephenson novels, and I go pretty far back with those books. And so I'd say
if you create enough science fiction on your own, you don't need to read other people's science fiction.
Yeah, I also don't want to be accused of plagiarism, So
fair enough.
Every time I invented anything, somebody will tell me, "Oh yeah, they did that in Star Trek." And since I didn't watch Star
writing
Trek,
in a TV show does not make an invention.
well, I think it's an important part of it. Yeah, it's an important part of the life cycle. We need the science fiction authors to create practical visions of the future. And I think right now they're doing a terrible job. They're being lazy and irresponsible, and they're writing all these dystopian stories, which are scary, and they sell better, but that's the
no
easy
wonder
shit.
all doom and gloom, and I've turned into a prepper. Thanks, science fiction.
Yeah, right. I think we should boycott dystopia.
Yeah.
And join me in creating like the dystopia resistance movement.
I like that. I need a little positivity in my day to day.
Yeah, the future can be awesome. There is literally no evidence that it has to be horrible. But people are pessimistic by nature or something.
Well, I also think the future can be awesome, and I think. Dune is my favorite science fiction book of all time, and Robert Babcock is definitely wrong for commenting that Dune anything but Dune. So, no, Robert, I disagree.
Right, you can arm wrestle over that one.
So again, Pablos, thank you so much for finding the time to chat with me today. I really enjoyed it. I could have pictured you, talked you off for another 3 hours. You've got a company, Deep Future, where you're a general partner, and I know that's a lot of your focus these days. But if people want to find you, they can obviously find you on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And I love that you got at Pablos, which I think is awesome. Any other places that people, if they want to go learn more about you, they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't post a lot of stuff online, but the podcast at deepfuture.tech is cool, and we have a lot more coming there. I like to just go have conversations with people who are smarter than me and try to learn about the problems in the world and the technologies we can use to solve them. So if that sounds interesting, there's the podcast. And then, yeah, and then if, I like to work with inventors and entrepreneurs who are inventing these new technologies. And so if you find anybody with crazy hair and a DeLorean, then send them my way.
I mean, I get crazy ideas, but I've got no
Yeah.
hair. Would I still qualify?
Yeah, you're totally disqualified. No, actually,
Oh,
it's
damn
surprising how important the bald guys are. I don't know. We need a lot of them. I think
it.
every time I find myself in the room with the bald guys. So
I loved when you were giving dates earlier. I was like, this guy, I think he's 5 years older than me, and he looks 5 years younger. That's so unfair.
that's salsa dancing. I'm an obsessed salsa dancer. It'll keep you
I
younger.
would have never ever pegged that on
I
you. I think I
know.
love that. Well, that's a great random twist at the end. It was so good to meet you. So thankful you got on our ship. For those of
Awesome.
you watching and the show, thank you again for your support. The best thing you can do is like, share, and subscribe. Check out oshipshow.com if you haven't, and you can see all the different places, whether you want to watch us on video on any of our key streaming platforms, or you want to change over to listen to us passively on the audio format. Please do that. But again, Pablos, thanks for your time, and thank you to all of you for being subscribers to Oship. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.